welcome back to On Air with Dr. Pete. I'm your host, Dr. Pete Economo, and we're going to talk about bed rotting. Is it rest, retreat, or a red flag? I was scrolling through, and because I do that as well, I do it mindfully and with boundaries. And I saw this thing on TikTok that referenced bed rotting, and they dared to call it self care. That's why people don't believe everything you see, read, hear on the internet, certainly on social media. That is not self care by staying in bed all day. Now, it's cool to stay in bed all day. I've actually said to people, once in a while, I'm thankful when I get sick for a few reasons. I'll explain that. I'm thankful because it forces you to slow down. And for me, it's the universe and your body saying you're doing too much. And so it's not such a bad thing to like slow down and, feel like, ugh. But I notice my thoughts during that where I'm like, oh, I'm weak, or why, there's other things I could be doing. But the truth is, so staying in bed all day could be okay. But I think what these adolescents are doing is different. So, you know, it is also post-pandemic. There's constant global stressors, and there's a lot of burnout. And so when you might be doing this bed rotting, it is, something to be really mindful of. Now, this is not. So bed rotting is when people are just staying in bed, often with their phones. Now, here's the thing. Phones are not meant for the bed. The bed is just for sleep and sex. So if you're under 18, pretend like you didn't hear that, or I guess we have to tag this as, I don't know if we have to tag this as adult, but anyway, that's really sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene says the bed is just for sleep and sex. So you don't want to be doing anything else. And so certainly not the phone. All of you are thinking, well, it's my alarm clock. Buy an alarm clock. I have said that over and over again. So if there happens to be a client listening, they will know that they've heard that from me. There's some really amazing technologies and good alarm clocks out there. Get one. You don't need to have your phone in bed. So people that are sitting there or laying there just reading the phone and on social media, this is bed rotting. You want to make sure that you are aware of it, because from a psychological perspective, this is a temporary withdrawal process. It's withdrawal from experiences and sensations you might be experiencing. I just said experience twice there, but it's withdrawal from the emotions, the distress that you're experiencing. You're trying to come away from that, withdraw from that. But also, we notice that when we don't have our phones, that's also another form of withdrawal. People will withdraw like we do from chemical substances when they do not have their phone. So, look, it makes sense that you might need some extra rest, but a prolonged withdrawal can feed stress. And this is where the behaviorism comes in. If you're trying to, say, avoid a feeling, then by withdrawing from it, it makes that feeling stronger. This is learning theory, which it reinforces the behavior to say, oh yeah, this feeling, this stress I'm feeling, or this tension is really stressful. So I'm going to, I need to get away. I can't feel this. That the more that I get away because I don't want to feel it, then the more and the stronger that becomes. So you really want to make sure that you're aware of that. And so what we do in mindfulness is you want to contact the present moment. And so it's not always exciting to contact the present moment. Often we'll say things like waiting online at the supermarket. Those are things, being in traffic, delayed flights. Those are things that people don't want to experience. And by making full contact with that present moment, radically accepting what is and not trying to change things, that's what actually will make us emotionally stronger. So there can be some short-term relief relief in bed rotting. So I'm saying both ends of this, and I realize that, and I do that on purpose because that's middle path in mindfulness. Middle path means both of these things can be true. So both bed rotting could be good and bad. It could be a reset button. I know sometimes if I'm had a long day or overwhelmed, I might lay, somewhere. We have a guest room where I could lay, or somewhere I'm not going to lay in bed though, intentionally, because I practice the sleep hygiene. So even though I might want to, I'd rather lay on the floor or find some other space to do it, because that's also helpful. First of all, if you're less comfortable, you're going to be less likely to stay there longer. But also, you don't want to be doing anything else, and I mean this, other than sleep and sex in the bed. So you don't want to be just laying there to have that. I do think that so I want to talk for a moment about the benefits of bed rotting, because I'll always, I could see both sides of most things, or all sides. One of the things we say in mindfulness is like, nothing's all, it's not all or nothing. And I think about like a coin. And so I'll say to somebody, well, how many sides of the coin are there? Because a lot of people think in this black and white, like there's either heads or tails. And if you're a sports fan right now in fall sports, you know that you see that at the beginning of a lot of games. But if we were sitting in, across from each other at a desk, I could also take, say, for example, a nickel for those Americans listening and put it up on its side. So there's a third side. And that's what we like to think about there. So there are some benefits. So as I just noted, it could be a reset button, and that's cool. But it also gives permission to stop. And that's really important for high achievers. It's okay to stop. We need to stop. Everybody has to stop. It's like I think about the Energizer Bunny in the commercial, for batteries. Even that battery will stop. So it's okay. And sometimes we just need permission to stop. And going back to that first point, that's why I like getting sick every so often. But this past winter, I took a tincture and I didn't get sick once this whole winter. So that was cool too, though. It's also important to have that wellness and well-being aspect. So one other thing about bed rotting, the benefit is that it could be a reduction of overstimulation. So in the real world, we've got like the TV on and the music on and your phone ringing and, the social demands and work, and you really can't escape it any longer. So it might be that, so even if you're bed rotting, maybe you put your phone away for a minute. I don't think adolescents are doing that, but consider that. So here's the important thing. Rest is not laziness. Rest is not laziness. So some risks and red flags. I want to say that if, like anything else in life, if it's too much of anything, that is a problem. So if you're doing this too often, or if there's too much withdrawal, you're probably leading into isolation. Oftentimes people I work with, isolation is a risk factor or a sign or a symptom. It kind of preempts any kind of, say, depressive episode or anxious episode. So notice if it is going into that. Bed rotting will impact the circadian rhythm. This is exactly why I'll lay on the floor, I'll lay on the lounge, or a guest room somewhere else, like a chair somewhere that's a little bit more comfortable. The circadian rhythm, wants to have that. And sleep hygiene, go to sleep, wake up at the same time. If you have an animal, you'll notice that they're probably pretty consistent. Mine are, and part of that's because I've conditioned them that way, but also they're conditioned that way. So, your animal knows what time dinner is or what time breakfast is, and they will respond to that. Those are rhythms that, physiologically, just like the circadian rhythm, the body wants to and needs to have. There's also the risk of a worsening depression or fueling anxiety. That's what I was saying about the idea of escapism. So if I am avoiding a situation, a feeling, an experience, that avoidance of it makes it stronger. That is the antithesis. It's sort of, it feels like that temporary relief is just so rewarding. And that's why we really emphasize that in behaviorism. It's important not to do that. So you want to distinguish between intentional rest and avoidant threat. I think those are important ideas to think of. I've talked a lot about avoidant retreat. Oh, I think I just said avoidant rest. No, intentional rest and avoidant retreat. So I've talked, if it's an intentional, like a 10-minute just escape from people, or, the in-laws are there, the whole family's there, like you might just need a little bit of a reset. That's okay. That's intentional rest. Avoidant retreat is what I've been talking a lot about. So if there's feelings that you're trying to get away from, or responsibilities, or just to disconnect from life, that is a red flag. You want to notice that. So if you're doing this like multiple days in a row, that's a red flag. If you're neglecting other aspects of your daily living, such as eating or your hygiene or social contact, so it will cross the line over to isolation pretty quickly, either for yourself or for one of your children, adolescent that you might be around. And then if you notice that you're feeling worse rather than better, that's another thing that you want to be aware of. So find other alternatives. This is one thing on Air with Dr. Pete that we're really trying to emphasize here, is that there's, and I've said it, it's a lot harder to feel good. It takes a lot more commitment and work. But I'm encouraging you to do it because, like I just said about this tincture, I didn't get sick once last winter, and I'm around a lot of people, and I always get sick, just like a 1 or 2 day sort of thing. Last winter with that, not once. And so, that took a commitment, but, was it really that hard to take a couple drops of this tincture a day? And it wasn't. Now, was that psychosomatic? Was it a placebo effect? Who knows? But hey, maybe that'll be one of my next studies. So you want to reframe this bed rotting idea. if you're doing it and you notice that you like it, just even in your mind, this is the intention setting. Intentionally reframe this as a structured reset. So bedrock with a timer, right? So maybe there is a 15 to 30-minute window. There's no real number here. But to find some sort of time frame where maybe you can do this, not the whole day. You just don't want to do that unless you're sick. If you're sick, when I reflect back on the pandemic, early on, I had it and tested positive, and just stayed in the guest room. And in some ways, technology allowed for me to. I was actually still teaching because I could, because I was virtual. But having some time to just stay kind of grounded, and again, that permission to rest. If you're thinking about bedrotting, pair it with some other soothing activities. So maybe it's a guided meditation, some journaling. That could be a way that you make it a little bit healthier. Some gentle movement. So maybe that you're like stretching a little bit, like happy baby, or just like a twisted, kind of cross your knee over, your body, and just some sort of things just to stretch your body a little bit. You definitely want to do this outside the bed. I do believe that. So create a space if you can somewhere in your room or in your house or your apartment. Can you create some space like in the corner somewhere where there's a blanket, a candle, some comfy sort of pillows, things of that nature? You want to have some mindful check-ins. So over and over again, you could never lie to yourself. So check in with yourself. Like, hey, am I trying to escape? Like, what is this? And don't, just acknowledge that. It's not like, oh, I'm escaping, so I shouldn't do it. No, just mindfully embrace that and then set your timer. That's really how we do this from a boundary perspective. And true self-care includes both rest and engagement. So that's what's important, is that, yes, you're allowed to relax and do nothing, but also you need to be mindful and to socially engage. So, I hope you learned a little bit about bedrotting, and this is we are in this collective struggle. From Buddhism, we learn, and this is from where mindfulness comes from, that everyone is suffering. So if you are listening and you're like, oh my God, I'm so alone, I'm the only one that does this, I feel like I don't want to be around anyone, you are not alone. This is the universal experience, is suffering. And that, while that might sound really pessimistic or negative, it's not. Anyone you look up to is suffering. Everybody has that experience. And if you don't acknowledge that, and you don't kind of commit to well-being, and overall just sort of peace, you will have burnout. And that's a lot of what this bed rotting kind of research is probably going to tell us. We are in a world of overstimulation. We are in a world where we don't feel entirely safe, and not politically driven, but it's often kind of really hard just to feel safe. I've said this before, like, I used to go to school as a kid, and that was like the safe space. That's not always the case anymore. So have a compassionate lens when you think about this. Instead of judging yourself, ask, what is my mind and my body? What do they need? What are they actually asking for in this? And just give it to them, because it's a signal here. It's not just a solution. Bedrotting, so if you're doing it, it's a signal to say, hey, let me just check in with myself a little bit. So look, bedrotting, it can be a short-term reset. Just notice it. Look out for the red flags that we mentioned here. Aim for some intentional rest, not avoidance. Your body deserves rest, and you deserve peace. And while as cheesy as that might sound, that is really going to be, what we do in, in mindfulness and all this stuff, is to say peace. Like, I really, a lot of times, if I'll share a secret, that when I'm blowing out the candles on my birthday, I'm thinking about peace. It's not, I'm not asking for like some fancy stuff or items. I'm asking for peace, and both internal and external, and so listen, thank you so much for tuning in. Reflect on your own rest habits. What do you do to rest? And like, share experiences, with others. I think sharing your bedrotting with people around you, could be loved ones, probably is best. So, find that, because we are in the fall season, and, we just maybe started school. And so we are going to have a lots of new, like, school tips and things that you can do to manage stress as you deal with this, this transition. So Thank you, as always, for listening at home. We're so thankful for all your support, and we encourage you to like, follow, and share. Everything is at officialdrpete.com. So if you want to learn more about some school stuff in this fall season, tune in next week because we'll have some more of that for you. But until then, spread a little kindness and stay well.